And now this is hard one. Yahweh is one of the recipients of an inheritance from the high deity Elyon, according to Deuteronomy 32, 8 to 9. So do you agree with this?
Yeah, this is a good question, and this question and some of these other questions, I go into more detail. Let me just say, in my Israelite religions book, I wrote a book called Israelite Religions. It's been translated into a couple of different languages as well, and the positions I explained there, giving the biblical as well as ancient Near Eastern evidence, are ones that I still hold to. And when it comes to Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9, that's an important text, and I think it's worth reading here, if I may just. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the people according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance. Now, that's a straightforward statement. It suggests that God gave Israel a special inheritance, maybe, but he gave all the nations lands to live in. And he says in here in verse 8, he set up boundaries for all the people according to the number of the sons of Israel. Well, I believe that. If you count, and I think at one point it says that the number of those descendants who went down into Egypt with Jacob and Joseph in Genesis were 70 in all. And out of that, the nations grew. So there's a kind of tradition of 70 as being a special number, and the idea of 70 nations. Genesis 10 already, the table of nations, leans towards this, suggesting there were 70 known nations of that time. And so that's the basic sense that's explained here in the traditional Hebrew text called the Masoretic text. And that text, which we have good evidence for as being a reliable text overall, is in fact the basis for the translation of all modern translations of the Bible, that particular Hebrew text of the Old Testament. But in the Greek translation done sometime maybe in the 200s BC, in the Greek translation, it says he set up boundaries for the people according to the number not of the sons of Israel, but according to the number of the angels of God. The angels of God. And so what does that mean? Well, there's been a lot of discussion about it, but it seems as though the text, or at least the tradition of the Septuagint, the Greek translators, was either they had a different Hebrew text or they were developing something very, very different. And they regarded the angels of God as being in control. And here we can kind of look at what I believe that's talking about in Psalm 82, where this kind of idea is also mentioned. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit at another time. But for this text here, what we have is a different reading. And it's not that terribly different, the angels of God versus the sons of Israel. Both would be similar, but angels of God elsewhere suggests a huge number of angels. And so some people have tried to read this in different ways, that God was being led by the angels to set up boundaries. And then there's this text from Qumran, the one text that does contain some of the words in this verse. It's a broken text. We don't have all the words, so that's important, which makes it always a little bit iffy what you do with it. But it does contain part of Deuteronomy 32:8. But it doesn't say sons of Israel, and it doesn't say angels of God. The first part of it, the first word seems to be sons of, but the second word is broken, but part of it does not read Israel, but reads God, Elohim. So it seems to read sons of Elohim, sons of God, which then again some people take to be a way of talking about a time when there was a pantheon of gods. And as you said, the Most High here, Yahweh, was one of them. And he has somehow gained power and became the super God in charge of all the rest and deposed them. And that this is a reflection of that earlier time in this, I agree, a very old poem that's recorded here, going back, I believe, to times such as those of Moses. The problem, I think, with that is that the text does not clearly suggest that the Masoretic text we have can be interpreted straightforwardly just as it is. We don't need to go to these other interpretations. And where do these interpretations come from? Well, we actually don't know, but we do know that during the time when the Septuagint was translated and during the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are many, many variations and lots of different texts floating around in Judaism that describe all kinds of things and are very interested. Particularly, you can look at, for example, the so-called Book of Enoch. First Enoch talks about the angels falling from heaven and other things going on. So there's a lot of different, I would say, somewhat mythological material being created and fed into and being read by different people in Judaism and outside of that. And I believe that some of that may have influenced these particular interpretations. But I don't really see this as strong evidence to read it, even though I know that some people do. I don't see it as strong evidence to find here a kind of shadow of a time when Yahweh or the Lord God was just one among other gods, and they were equal to him in power and strength. That there's just not the evidence here.